All right, let's give folks maybe 30 more seconds.
All the things that can happen in 30 seconds, James. Said the ex-flight attendant.
Yeah.
No, sorry, I thought we were landing. Oh, what do you mean prepare for a crash landing? Oh, Darren, I know that article. I know I'm taking over your agenda, James. My heart is racing. I can't believe it. I'm so excited. Did you have a chance to see it, James? Or anyone?
I haven't. Is it in Foster's?
Yeah, I can't see straight. I'm so excited.
When did that run?
I didn't see it till this morning, so.
Okay. I'll take a look.
Yeah. All of us are getting such great press. I know we all don't have the same reporter. I'm stalling while you're loading, James, but our Megan Fernandez is leaving November 4th is her last day. And I don't know if she just covered Summersworth. I know Mike has a different reporter in Rochester. Who do you have, Reed? Do you have Megan? Oh, you do? She's been great. Who do you have, Sean?
I don't know.
Oh, might be Megan. I don't know.
We have Ian.
Nope.
Ian Monahan.
Do you like him, Ben?
He does a nice job. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben.
Got you, Sean. One team, right?
I know, Robin, I'm a little bummed. I asked Megan who was taking over for
Yeah.
her. I don't know if you asked her, but she told me that they had 400 layoffs at Gannett.
Are you?
Yeah, that's crazy. So
kidding?
she has no idea who's taking over for her.
I wonder if it means the Tri-City area won't have dedicated reporting then.
That's what I'm wondering too,
Or
because I usually am pretty close with the reporters that we've had in the past, the last
Yeah.
3. And
Oh.
I have no idea who's coming on this time.
400 national layoffs, right? I'm assuming.
Yep.
Right? Wow. It's a changing world.
Yeah.
But still, and you're all reading so many stories about it. What does this changing world mean to telling the story of community?
Yeah.
It's really an interesting time. If you don't have those boots on the ground, what does it mean?
It means that you get Chris Parker doing a podcast.
And that's a good point. Maybe it does. Well, you know what? I don't know how you feel, Reed. Maybe it's different. And I know that it is in Portsmouth, Sean, but I think it speaks a lot to the whole idea of especially municipalities having a director of corporate communications, a dedicated person who's a professional in this area. Maybe the chambers jump in new ways, who knows? But with 400 layoffs, and if there's not a replacement in the communities, how do you report who finds the news?
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
and that's
maybe-
not something. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I was gonna say, we just send them press releases and they just copy and paste it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
It's an easy time to get articles published. You just
Yeah.
get to them and they drop it in.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, I'm going to share that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think that, to a certain extent, we're still a little bit spoiled out in the Seacoast. I'm the planner in Northwood. So there was a paper that sort of covered the in-between region, the Suncook Sun. And that closed up, I want to say like 2018. It was definitely before the pandemic. And basically, like even for notice stuff, when their regs said they had to notice in the paper, they had to make a decision about whether to put it in a Seacoast paper or a Concord paper.
Yeah.
And it really didn't matter because nobody was going to see it in either spot.
Yeah.
So we definitely have a lot of sort of small communities who were already kind of caught in between.
Yeah.
So speaking of Chris, let's let him hop in and then we can get started. So a few different things on the agenda today, but to start, I just wanted to take a look at sort of where we were going for the rest of this quarter. of 2022, we sat down sort of as a coordination team with SRPC and RPC and REDC to think about how we're organizing and scheduling the calls, sort of take a look at what we might have lined up for the rest of the year. And I've put all of the calls the rest of the year in your agenda. Right now, there are only 4 Tuesdays that we would normally have these scheduled if we're going every other week. But 2 of them I wanted to ask about, sort of 3, but 2 in particular. So December 27th, I'm guessing not a whole lot of people are going to be around. So I'm sort of assuming that we're going to cancel that call.
Right.
Heads nodding, thumbs up. We're not going to meet on the 27th. Okay. Also, during our call in 2 weeks, November 15th, is New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority's Housing and the Economy Conference. That I believe is the first time they're doing it in person again since the pandemic. They've done some online stuff. And I took a brief look at the panel of speakers. I wasn't familiar with all of them, but I know Joe Minicozy is supposed to be coming back. He gave a great presentation a year or 2 ago about sort of density of property values and tax assessment, and thinking about, you know, on a per acre or per square mile basis, where most of your revenue actually comes from, sort of as a pitch in favor of high density downtown mixed use kind of development. So I'm sure whatever he has to say is going to be fascinating. Would people be interested in canceling this call on the 15th to be able to attend that?
I'm attending that, James.
I'm seeing a few head nods. Okay, so we can plan to give our talk a miss. Yeah, but highly recommend that conference. It's always one that I look forward to. So definitely check that out. So that leaves us basically with November 29th and December 13th. And with things that we had talked about scheduling, it sounds like there was interest in having Kit McCormick from REDC on to talk about Kiva, and scheduling her as a speaker. We are going to start discussing some of our metrics for Cedars grants this morning, but we are going to need to have a list pulled together for BEA in December. So we'd like to circle back to that conversation once we get there. And you know, we don't have much of a follow-up for workforce development this morning. Warren and Ed let me know they're not able to join us. They have an all-day SBDC staff meeting, but we are sort of tentatively guessing that we might want to have some of you crowdsource some of the best practices. You know, we'll try pulling them together and then, you know, send them around to all of you to look at, talk over, see if we've missed anything, or if you have questions or suggestions. So we could try and fit those into November 29th and December 13th, or we could schedule an additional call, probably easiest to do on December 6th.
I was thinking we should do the December 13th meeting in person and celebrate Robin's last time on with this group.
It's a great idea.
Guys
I'm
are just-
certainly open for an in-person conversation.
we don't-
Fair.
You're way too sweet. I want to meet on January 1st so I can gossip. No, you guys don't need to do that. We could meet at the housing summit. Is everyone going to the housing summit?
This Thursday?
No, the one on, what is it, the 15th or whatever? What were we just talking about?
Yeah. That is the Housing and Economy Conference, which is different from the Seacoast Housing Summit,
Oh, gotcha.
which is this Thursday morning at the Governor's Inn.
Oh, right. Yeah, right. Thank you for that, Tickler. Right.
Well, James, you want to keep the 6th as a tentative and make sure you can fit all the things in we want to fit in if we need to respond to BEA or others.
Yeah, we can do that, and we can circle back on the 29th if people aren't ready to commit at this point. All right.
Right.
And then were there any other, yeah, I think those were sort of the high level things that we got out of last time's call for immediate next steps. Was there anything else that I missed in that list that in your minds was definitely a pressing, we need to talk about this ASAP?
James, I had sent you an email. I don't know if you saw it, with some really great resources for the workforce discussion. There were some awesome speakers that I had listened to at the Greater Chamber of Commerce. It was about how to retain workers and how to get them. I thought it would be, I sent the email, I can resend it to you if you want, but that might be some really great people to have speak. There was somebody from the Letty group that was phenomenal.
Yeah, if you could send that, that would be great. Because I'm not seeing it in my inbox.
Okay.
Did you accidentally send it to my city email?
It's possible. Let me do that.
So
I've
you
done
guys
that a
need to be
couple times.
extra careful about doing that, because as of October, I am no longer on the ZBA. So I'm going to be
Alright.
checking that email even less.
Okay, fair enough. Let me double check and I'll resend it to you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, thoughts on speakers? Or topics, or what have you? Okay, hearing none, moving on to the next one. Grant metrics. We, as part of the Cedars grant, need to be, reporting. I think the contract just says periodically to BEA about the impact of our work under that grant. So, we think we're probably going to have a wide variety of, maybe more output-based measures than necessarily outcomes. But we're trying to think about how can we get any sort of demonstration of the value of the work that we do. And we wanted to pitch to you specifically this morning to ask you to start brainstorming ways that we could describe and potentially quantify the value you all get just out of being on these calls and having these conversations. I think some of we'll talk with John about what he's getting out of his career pathway program and what we might be able to track there. We'll definitely focus with the workforce group about what we can track as far as our reach there. But a large part of that grant is also just continuing to facilitate these conversations for all of you.
So James, excuse me for interrupting, but do you need that in a more formal letter since you'll be using it as a tool for grants? Or can we just send an email? And what is the what is the specific grant we should reference?
So I think the grant is just an award from BEA
Okay.
out of their ARPA funds for the operation of the Cedars. That was that proposal we put together.
Oh,
back
right. Yeah.
like January, February.
Yeah.
So I want to say something like 40% of that grant, give or take, is going towards, just sort of operating these calls and
Okay.
continuing to facilitate this group.
Okay.
So for right now, I'm sort of looking for ideas for, what you might all have in common that you might be able to give me information about. And once we're sort of on the same page for, what kind of information we might be compiling to send them,
Okay.
then we can talk about how
What's
to
your-
actually get it.
Okay, and what's your deadline for compiling this information and any support that we might offer?
So I would guess, and Mikhail, chime in if I'm off base, but I would guess that we're going to have to do this at least twice over the course of the grant, probably, since we run through the end of June.
Right, yes.
They need essentially the list of metrics from us in December. And I think if we're pitching metrics to them, if to the extent that we can measure, hey, this is, what we would see on these metrics already, since the award period, or if I think it technically started like October 1st, so maybe we just go this quarter. It would be great to send them those numbers and preliminary information as sort of a progress report. And then even if we don't have to do a quarterly in March, we'll definitely have to give sort of an overview, by the end of June.
Okay, so James, I want to do this before I leave. And so do you prefer this as a more formal document, as a PDF, or just an email saying kind of, oh, by the way?
I think either would work.
Okay.
It depends on what we are sort of pitching as demonstrating that value. If it's just, I have learned information that has helped me with 10 business inquiries this quarter, on these calls, or, because of the relationships I've built, I've been able to support, this many businesses, or things like that. If it's just numbers, an email would be fine, and I can put all of the numbers together into a single figure. It sort of depends on what your thoughts are and what you're willing and able to send me. John?
Just as an FYI, as you all know, I have one of those grants also. And luckily, James, it appears that you have a little bit more leniency than I. I have to do a quarterly report of my metrics. And one of the things that I would recommend, because I think, as you had mentioned, a big part of this this meeting has to do with information sharing. And then when you take the information that you've shared, what do we do with it? And then what is the end result of that information? And I'll give you an example. And it was just, I don't know if some of you might have seen it already, but today, BEA reopened the small $15,000 grant for restaurant revitalization. So I'm sharing that with you all now. And those then will go back into the communities and say, Darren is now got my information. He is now going to share it with his businesses in Exeter. And then the outcome of his sharing is that 4 restaurants in Exeter has now applied for that $15,000 grant. So I think if we look at it from the information sharing, who then takes that information, does something with it, and then the end result is the, that metrics that they want us to be able to see that this group has done something, not only sharing, but has, gone forward to create an action item with an end result. That would be my thought process.
John, that's just excellent. I didn't know that. I'm hearing it for the first time, and I will be saying that to my businesses, and I appreciate it very much.
Do you all, for programs like that, do you typically hear back from your businesses if they apply to something like that or something like Invest New Hampshire? Do they let you know?
Yes, always.
Is that pretty general?
Mine don't always get back to me. We usually find out afterwards that they looked into the program or after they get it.
But one of the things that we do, and I'm sure that some of the other organizations, including chambers, do it. So right now, Rusty Bridle and I have identified 6 restaurants in our area that we think would be qualified and eligible. So we're going to sit down with each one and work the applications with them to make sure that they are clear on understanding, because keep in mind, a lot of these restaurant owners have no idea how to fill out applications. And that's not meant derogatory, but it's just that's fact of life. So I think the importance part of whatever that application, whatever that program is that we should be responsible also to walk through those applications with the end user.
John, do you do that for restaurants that aren't necessarily part of the chamber?
Yeah, in cases like this, we go out to the entire community. Not only do we talk to our own chamber members, that in this case restaurants, but we find that it's our responsibility, whether or not you're a member or not, to try to create a environment. And who knows, maybe by our efforts, someday they might join the chamber.
More importantly than that, I would think that the town of Hampton should give you guys funds, and I would sit with those restaurants in front of the budget committee next year and ask, because you're doing the job of an economic developer. You're doing the job of an economic developer and a chamber director, and I commend you for both.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess depending on the program too, if they had an applicants list in addition to an awards list, we would probably be able to track some of that information after the fact. X number showed up as applying, Y number were awarded funds. That would be a way to sort of ground truth some of the original data that we had. So that's a good idea. Other thoughts?
Well, one thing, James, I don't know if it's of value or it would be too much inundation, but a lot, we all represent organizations that have letterheads. And so if one was to write a letter saying these are the 10 ways or 5 ways that these calls help me do my job better, you might summarize them in one letter and use those for evidence. Thoughts?
Yeah, we could definitely do that, especially for more qualitative things. It probably wouldn't boil down to a nice little number, but that's okay. Sometimes just showing impact is useful as well.
Yes, definitely.
I've been presenting topics on these calls to the town of Durham, who does not have an economic development director anymore, but I've been presenting it to the town council on a regular basis. So if you wanted to add that to your list, impact, it's the town of Durham, it has an impact, this call.
Great.
I mean, that arts cultural map that Durham businesses could add to, there've been a couple of specific things from these calls that Durham would not have been aware of. And it, I believe, would directly help some of the small businesses and regular businesses that are here.
Great, thanks for that feedback.
Okay.
So anything else sort of quantifiable that you might be able to put a number to? Time saved, yeah, number of leads. I know we don't share a ton of that here, but sometimes it's come up in the past.
Whatever you ask for, if you have a specific ask, like, those things you just said, number of leads or whatever, I think we can all probably ballpark it. Because I think that's what the BEA wants to see. I think they want to see actual impact, be able to justify it, especially if we're looking for funding in the future. So whatever you decide that we need to provide, I'm sure we'll all do it.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm sort of looking for from your end what that is most likely to look like. If we say, hey, is there any way for you to quantify like a number of businesses that besides individual programs, just like a general, how many businesses you're able to help, or how many jobs are supported by information you've learned, or I know some of that can be difficult to get information about unless you are actually working closely with the business. Amount of outside funding that you're able to bring into your communities, those kinds of things. So have a think about that, and we can circle back to that call or circle back to some of those details in December, and I'll follow up via email. Mikhail, if we have another call on these in December, would end of December work for BEA to compile and submit all of those things?
Yes, I think so. I'm gonna check that date for you though.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And the time saved metric, I like that metric.
Mhm.
I mean, of course, I can't, tell you exactly what metrics to use, but considering that everyone on this call is at a certain managerial level, if these programs of budgets, information, assets have saved you time, absolutely. Yeah, great metric.
I think for some of the smaller communities, or communities who come in and out, you don't have an economic development person, Joe, like you were saying. I think talking about it sort of as this is a way for us to keep up with economic development without an economic development specialist, and sort of as a middle ground of if we can't hire even a part-time person, sort of a way to keep our hand in the game. I think sort of some of those capacity conversations about being able to learn from other folks and then apply it as volunteers or as elected officials or as other planning staff, administrative staff, probably tells a similar kind of capacity value added story.
I don't know if this actually helps the argument. Mikhail, maybe you have an opinion about this, but I get so riled up in these discussions of protecting this and funding and supporting this interactive forum. And just real quickly, and sorry if I'm on the bandwagon and beating the horse's drums again, but this group was created in 1993 because there was no communication and collective connection between the Tri-City area and Portsmouth included. And I keep telling you, I want everyone, this is my parting words before I leave, because it just goes to speak. We were prohibited as chambers of commerce and economic development directors to meet and talk among the cities and towns. And so we had to privately do this. I snuck everyone in the back door of the Dover Chamber of Commerce for quite a while. And from that expanded, I've said a million times, the Cooperative Quality of Life magazine, cooperative executive council meetings. And so many years later, this is who and what we are today. And especially, I think we all deserve so much credit for connecting and sharing information and support mechanisms during the pandemic. So I don't have the facts and I don't have the data and I don't know how many businesses, but what I can do is tell the story of how critical this is to the success of all of our communities in the region. And I feel, as you can tell, quite passionate about that. So that it has evolved to this level of sophistication is a testimony to those people who are participating in it. And to your role, you took it to the next step during the pandemic. And I find it very annoying that you even have to ask money. People should be writing checks just voluntarily, but that's my opinion. I'll get off the bandwagon.
And of course, we are going to be taking the reports from the other three seaters and just sort of paper clipping them behind ours because they just reduplicated the idea throughout the state. So, Sean?
Yeah, James, I know the Ed and Warren aren't here, but they, SBDC, they measure a lot of things. And I don't know if that would be applicable in terms of, what they can attribute to their participation here. And because they have such a great mechanism for measuring who they're dealing with and who they're helping and what they're doing for them. Right. So,
yeah. And I think I sent an email to the small group. I think it would be great if we could find a time to meet in the next week or two to circle back. So that's definitely a conversation that I was planning to have for some of the workforce stuff anyway. But to the extent that they have more general things as well, that would certainly be helpful.
I'll just give an anecdote too. Previously, I was pretty involved in the Merrimack Valley Chamber of Commerce over in the 93 corridor. And when Lawrence had those big gas explosions and what happened down there, I don't know if anybody here heard about that. It was a couple of years ago, but the fact that all the towns were talking on a regular basis, their emergency response and preparedness and reaction was very well coordinated between the three towns of Andover, North Andover, and Lawrence. So it's a side piece, but if something big happens, it's nice to be connected to the surrounding towns because it may happen to only one town, but the other towns are certainly impacted by it all.
Yeah. Great point. Anything else on this topic? All right, we'll put that on an agenda again in December to circle back to, probably with a more specific ask of what we would like to give you or what we would like you to give us and when. And then if you have any other, ideas of, hey, everybody probably has this, send it my way and we can include that when we reach out for information. The Workforce Development Subcommittee, I think we just weren't able to get together between the last call and today. I think we are still making some progress towards getting information out for consultants. We confirmed with our procurement policies that it doesn't actually need to be a full RFP. This falls under the threshold where we are able to seek some quotes. So if you have marketing people who could do some of the sort of content generation, since this project is looking for, hey, can somebody do some videos, some podcasts? If you've got people you've worked with and you think would be great, send them my way, because we will probably be sending out a 1 or a 2 pager looking for quotes and information about their firms at some point this month.
Right.
Sean, anything else to add?
No, that pretty much covers it. We definitely need to get together and do some work.
Yep. All right. That's all I had on the agenda. Anybody have anything else you want to bring up, John?
Just, and that probably just falls under new business, but I think one of the things that I benefit from participating in these meetings is, once again, as I said earlier, information sharing. So maybe we should look at, and this is just an idea, of going into 2023 of where we have, maybe not every meeting, but maybe every other meeting, a did you know segment of the meeting. And I look at my friend Ginny, who does a great job in posting a number of different grant awards or grants that fall under her jurisdiction. And, you know, some of us know it, but I would think that out of the 27 people on this call, some of them might not know that there could be an artist or a crafter in your community that could benefit from a grant that Ginny has, that they just don't know. And I look at Joe up in Durham and think about, is there something that he's doing up in Durham that we all can benefit from? You know, it's the old plagiarism, cut and paste. But I think that maybe if we just had a small segment of these meetings, just to kind of go around the room and say, did you know? I think it might be helpful. And then we all, as individuals, can follow up after the meeting with the individual and say, hey, you talked about this during the meeting. Can you elaborate? Or can we sit down and talk about it further? Because I might have somebody in my community that might be interested. And as I said, Ginny has been very, very helpful to my community with getting the word out for grants, and we took advantage of them and she signed off on them. So we now have some grants through her. So I think it's just important that this information sharing continue.
Thanks, John. And I'll jump in just to say that I've been attending meetings of all 4 Cedars. And this group, far and away, is the most active in terms of the work that you're doing and the participation. And in fact, last week, there was a meeting of the Central South group, and they had a pretty difficult conversation about their mission going forward because they've lost membership. Chambers aren't attending anymore. The economic development folks are not attending anymore. And I think we've seen that with the other 2 as well, that there's incredible attrition and they're still trying to find their place. And maybe this group, because you've been meeting regularly for so long, your relationships are already developed. And so I'm wondering if, you know, there's some best practices that you might want to share with Mikhail, that he can bring back to his folks to try to help those groups kind of get back to doing what they were supposed to be doing.
Maybe you guys should take it outside of the actual group and maybe just go out for drinks and hang out. No, really, that's actually how we've built some of the best and closest relationships that we have with each other. So maybe it's about taking it outside of the office and actually getting to know each other on a personal level.
Yeah.
Wow, well said.
Yeah, and I think that, you know,
Well
a lot
said.
of,
Wow.
yeah, there's some stuff in the chat as well. You know, this group existed in some formats before the pandemic.
Right.
It may have been, you know, a couple different groups. You know, we would keep the brown bag lunch going for just the economic development directors, and sometimes the chamber folks would pop in, before the pandemic. Some people were on either our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee or REDC's committee. And we just sort of mushed a couple of those mailing lists together. But there were already relationships to draw on. And I think sort of being through the worst of the pandemic together probably strengthened those and, helped us find a good format that worked for us pretty quickly. So, John, I love the idea of sort of going around the room, sharing information. That's sort of normally what I'm thinking of just any other items. Like, does anybody have anything to share that you want to throw out to the group? To that end, Ginny has put the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts Strategic Planning Community Survey link in the chat. So if people want to grab that before you sign off, it'll be open until December 2nd. Anybody else have anything you want to share?
I was just gonna ask John, John, they put that money back on the street for the restaurants. Is it because they didn't use the full amount, or did they refund it?
Believe it or not, the original allocation was $2 million. The first round, they only spent $1 million, and they were amazed. And whether or not it was lack of information of restaurants not knowing about it. So we had been pressing Commissioner Caswell to say, well, what are you going to do with the other $1 million? And he was very good to us to say, well, he was going to go back and see if he could bring it back as and he doesn't like to call it a second round, but more of a continuation of the program. So yeah, there's $1 million out there that we can take advantage of.
That's great.
Same
Thank-
thing
oh,
happened with
sorry.
Same thing happened with Save Our Granite Stages. And that was a result of the criteria being too narrow. And so we have broadened the criteria to venues that seat 1,500 or less, and production entities that produce in those size venues. And we're going back to fiscal and GNC in November for authorization to spend the money that we have left. We received $1 million for that program, and we still have over 800,000 left. So, you learn as you go with this stuff. And, John, I think with the restaurants, we have very small arts organizations who have the same kind of difficulty in filling out these applications. And so, there's a lot of technical assistance that's needed with these small businesses. And so, I expect that I'm going to be doing a lot of that once this second round of Save Our Granite Stages goes live.
So, John, are you talking about the Restaurant Infrastructure Investment Program?
Yes. It just came out. It came out as of this morning.
Okay. November 1st, 2022, application period reopens. So I'll drop that.
Oh, awesome.
There's that one. The latest info on Save Our Granite Stages is there. I wonder, so the restaurant program is focused on reimbursement of like COVID adaptations. It looks like it was originally, was it either originally or is it the current round that is, it has to have been purchased between November 1st, 2021 and this coming January. It feels like a lot of businesses had already sort of adapted prior to that point.
Well, one of the things that we've seen is that some of our restaurants did take advantage of round one, but there are others that have since, and what we're looking at, I think most of the restaurants we're working with right now have made improvements on outside dining. and have created now their permanent outside decks. And so a lot of those expenditures came after the fact. And that's why we're trying to capture, you know, those types of restaurants that have spent some money, because it is a reimbursable program. It is something that restaurants already spent money on. So it's not something that, you know, if they want to buy something in second quarter of next year, that's not an eligible activity, but it's something that they've already spent money on and they're now looking for reimbursement.
I wonder, so one thing that I'm dealing with a restaurant and their outdoor dining, we've talked about it as a group before, the fact that, you know, in July of 2020, whoever was, they basically were taking their seating capacity from inside and putting it outside. And it was a pure replacement because nobody could go inside and sit and eat. In July of 2022, if that outdoor dining had the same capacity, it was pretty typically in addition to what they were originally approved for inside. And we've talked about restaurants on septics in particular, that sort of a straining capacity kind of a thing. Seems like it would be probably too much of a stretch for a program like this to reimburse for expenses related to increasing the septic capacity. Right?
I'm not sure, but I do know that. So, for example, a restaurant owner that did temporary outside dining. So those expenses might have been before this starting date. But a lot of the restaurant, I should say some restaurants, then once they heard that they could go and make a permanent structure for outside dining, they then reinvested in new money. So, for example, I have a very small business. She runs a pizza restaurant, and she during COVID, she just bought some tables and chairs for outside dining. But then just this past summer, she then decided on her own, without knowing about this program, that she was going to fence in the area. She was going to bring out heaters. She actually put out a beautiful big TV screen. So she really dressed the outside area up. All of those expenses that she has now incurred this summer are all eligible under this program because it fits within the outside dining concept.
Good way to think about it. Right. Anybody else have anything you want to share this morning?
I just want to say thanks to John. Very much appreciated. Good info.
Yeah.
All the way
Thank you,
around.
John. I was just going to kind of jump in and add a little bit about what you're talking about, a little bit like capacity or what planners use, you know how intense the site is, and how do we do this dance from having a restaurant capacity of 75 people during the pandemic. They offered outside seating and tried to make up for that. Now that outdoor dining is now permitted and tons of municipalities are doing it on an annual basis, people are allowed to come back inside and outside. I think something that needs to kind of be addressed, which goes along the fact of, exceeding septic capacity or whatever, is that if that restaurant was originally approved for only 75 seats, but now you're adding outdoor dining and you already have your 75 inside, there needs to be, maybe just a little bit of watchdogging because you're increasing the capacity. There's other, health issues, there's liquor license issues, there's other issues that come into that. So if you've had 75, you need 75 to be total combo with your indoor and outdoor dining, not 75 inside and then adding more dining outside. Just kind of one of those little wrinkles that, goes in part with what you're saying about these increasing of capacities of sewer and other services for outdoor dining.
Yeah, and the one that, I'm working with, in Northwood, we don't have really anybody sitting in the right of way. So it's not, coming into public spaces and setting up tables. It was people changing how they were using their sites. So during the pandemic, I wrote for the Board of Selectmen an official policy that they could adopt that said, we're not going to enforce your site plan of record if what you're doing is in response to the pandemic and if you're instituting these temporary outdoor dining things. And all we said was check in with the building inspector, make sure that, you can demonstrate to him and the fire chief that what you're doing is safe and separated from traffic. And that's all we need to see. The problem now is the Board of Selectmen decided they were going to be, I don't know, business friendly or something. And they kept the policy for calendar 2022 when we were really sort of past all of that. And we needed people to come back and start actually updating their site plans. Love it if you want to keep outdoor dining, but now it's time to update the permit, show where you're going to have the area outside, and we can plan for all of the things, not just are people not going to get hit by cars, but do you have the parking? Do you have the septic? Is this actually going to work in the space that you're doing? And we're having a hard time actually getting these people to come in and do it because they have this permit that says they can operate, through the end of December if they really want to. So I think also trying to figure out how do we get rid of all of those temporary policies or exceptions that we made and get back to, sort of business as usual. How do you actually approach this permitting process?
Can I tell you how Exeter did it?
Sure.
So what we did is we everybody who had temporary outdoor dining during COVID that didn't have it prior to, it remains, all of it remains. We have a good infrastructure in the areas where those are, but what we do is the SP2 town, obviously everybody has to vote on everything. We have a select board. The select board voted to give authority to the town manager to deal with these issues. And so what we do is we have a sign-off sheet, digital sign-off sheet, that every department head has to sign off on. I shouldn't say every department head, but like highway guy, planning, econ dev, health, etc. So we all, there's a rudimentary sketch that goes out. We all look at it. We all go see the site. And within a day, maybe 2 days is the longest, we've all signed off on it. Once we all sign off on it, town manager signs off on it, done.
I mean, some of the, we get the requests have kind of quieted down, but, mostly at the beginning of the year for our municipal regional assistance inquiries, where some of these people, some of the business owners, some of the towns were saying, how do we move forward with this? I know that, some of the cities, Portsmouth, we've had this conversation before. I think, Chris, I think they're doing it in Dover as well, is where they were talking about taking the, how are you figuring out the metrics for continuing outdoor dining? It's successful. Versus other revenue and parking and other issues that the community is running into. But I think, what you did in Northwood was a great idea, James. And then now there's, again, we're trying, for every action, there's a reaction. So we're trying to clear this up. And I guess as one thing that you're talking about is things that need to be addressed is the intents of the site, the public safety, sending it off to DPW and fire and just making sure that, it's not trying to squelch the outdoor dining, it's successful and people, obviously if it's really been successful and it's been a great option. But on the flip side of that, we need to kind of rein that in to a point that other services aren't being negatively impacted by that. And that
and I think
that holistic look, like you're talking about, like all the departments and
right.
and streamlining it, because those can get, out of control.
Yeah, and I think we talked when we were focusing on like the right of way changes and things earlier this year or the end of last year on the liability as well. And for Northwood, it's also an underlying liability thing, in part because the policy was adopted when we had a bunch of governor's orders out there to rely on for why things should be different, and we don't have those anymore.
Right.
So,
And for every action, there's a reaction, right? So the non-restaurant owners who are losing the downtown parking, I'm sure I'm not, the expert like many other people are on this call, but you have that ebb and flow where a restaurant is buying up parking spaces, but then how is that affecting the other businesses?
yep.
And how do we all get along and figure out this parking thing? So there's a lot of ingredients to it and how to iron it all out.
So James, the liability, you talking about town property?
No, it's all on private property,
Okay.
but essentially the policy that I wrote is an intentional non-enforcement of site plan. So if we enforce a site plan against some other type of business that's not a restaurant, we're basically treating restaurants different from everybody else. And if we get a complaint and we get challenged on it, I'm not sure that policy is going to hold a lot of water anymore, since it was based on, emergency orders that don't exist anymore.
Right.
So.
If I'm a boutique owner, why can't I buy parking spaces out in front of my shop and put my clothes out there or furniture or put in my goods for sale out there, if restaurants are allowed to buy the parking spaces or pay a permit fee for that and take up parking spaces?
So
I mean, how do we handle that dance? Or is it an issue, or, is it not an issue?
Exactly what you just said is what we talked about in Dover. So if a restaurant owner or a business owner or any business owner came at us, we were going to treat them all fairly no matter what. We just didn't have boutique owners that came forward and asked for the parking spaces. We only had restaurants do it, but they were available to everybody.
That's great. That's great.
It's been an issue in Portsmouth for sure,
What?
in terms of restaurants, preferential treatment for restaurants, I would think. I mean, I read in the paper anyway.
Therefore, it must be true.
Yeah, right. I mean, I see their point. They got a good point. A lot of space is taken up by the restaurants, and the restaurants are suffering. I get it. And so, I mean, you have to be sympathetic to everybody. It's tough on all these businesses. That's why Portsmouth is, such a challenge when it comes to that, frankly.
Yeah, and we've got the city council has asked for a report out from the planning department on the impact of outdoor dining. So that's going to be coming towards the end of the year, just to kind of better inform the city council when they hear from different constituencies.
Good to know. Anything else for the good of the order? Coming up on 10 o'clock. All right. Thank you all. I'll send out a reminder that we are canceling the 15th. So everybody have fun, I think in Manchester at the Housing Finance Authority Conference, and we'll see you at the end of the month.
Thanks, James.
Thanks,
It'll
everybody.
be after
Bye, everyone.
Thanksgiving. So everybody have a great Thanksgiving too.
You too.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.